Hello and welcome to the last panel of the day and the last panel of the Collegiate Rising's Digital Esports Summit. My name is Peter Lam and I'll be your moderator for tonight. I want to thank you all for showing up throughout this weekend, and I hope everyone has had a fun time and learned a lot from our panelists. Right now, we have a very special guest. He's an esports OG with over 20 years of experience. It's because of his contributions that esports was able to develop and grow into this amazing industry we love today. Currently, he works at Twitch as the head of creator development. Before then, his roles included shoutcasting, hosting, content creating, producing, and most importantly, being a mentor to many people that are still working in this industry today. I am honored to introduce you all to Marcus Graham, also known as djWHEAT. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for spending your time here with us tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, Peter. I appreciate it. It was a very nice things you said. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I hope you're gonna have a fun time here too. So with this show, with this panel, I kind of want to take the audience on a journey through different periods of your career to learn about how you did things and what you learned, basically learning from your experience. So you ready to go?
I'm ready. I'm always ready.
All right, let's go. So let's start way at the beginning. How did you get your start in competitive gaming before it was even called esports?
Yeah, it was just because of a love for just that competitive gaming. I come from a family that was very sports driven, golf, bowling, softball, gymnastics. It's very sports focused family. But growing up, the video games interested me more than the golf clubs. And I just, started playing a lot of video games. Eventually, the Super Nintendo comes along, then I get Street Fighter, and then it's just me and my brother playing, best of 100s. And what I found is that I got so excited trying to be the best, right? Trying to be the one in the neighborhood that can stay on Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat all day, every day. And it really just kind of started and built from there. I don't know how else to explain it other than when you're playing, and people who relate with sports know exactly what I'm saying. I can't necessarily relate from a sports perspective, but I know it's the same. That like when you and I are locked in competition, it doesn't matter if it's a physical basketball on a court or if it's a rocket launcher in Quake. There is a similar feeling of I want to best my opponent, and it's still something that lives inside me even today.
Dang, that is cool. And so what was the first competitive game that was, I guess, you would consider esports?
For me personally, or just in general?
For you personally, because I know you started out as a competitive player. And so what was that game you played?
I played Quake, specifically competed. I mean, I competed in Quake 2. I played Quake 1. That's where I sort of found deathmatch, but hadn't found clans yet. Didn't really know about the competitive scene. Heard a lot about it, read a lot about it. Quake 2 is where we started playing 2v2s and TDM and one-on-ones. But Quake 3 is where the grassroots scene really kind of came together. And even today, in some ways, mimics what we had during the Quake 3 days. You'd have your regular competitions like QuakeCon, like CPL, but then throughout you'd also have, the East Team Play Net Cup, or we threw a cup, right? 519 Cup, or, several other, individuals and organizations that would run their Cash.net would run a tournament. It was just held up by the community, right? So that would, to me, is where the first, real kind of big competitive gaming came for me. That wasn't like the first time I had competed for something or money. That would actually be, that would probably be Tekken. But Quake was the one that was, to me, that's where I saw first glimpse of esports.
Yeah, that was certainly like a different time, you know. And LAN parties were definitely
Oh
a
yeah.
huge thing.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and those big ass heavy monitors that everyone have to. I mean, Peter, we would drive to a LAN party and we would put people in one truck and then all of our equipment in a second truck, and then we would alternate driving through because you needed an entire truck to carry 5 monitors, 5 PCs. Like it was pretty ridiculous. But
You
God,
know,
was it fun? Was it fun?
and Smash players, Melee players think they have it bad with their CRTs. Man, you got way more than that.
Yeah, I mean, we had to all carry our own. And you know, back then we were badasses because we had like 19-inch Sony 420 GSs, and these things were they must have weighed close to 150 pounds a piece. It was kind of ridiculous, but that's what we would do to compete. The furthest that we ever drove for a tournament was about 24 hours all the way through from Omaha, Nebraska to New York to compete in Battletop, where we ended up taking 3rd place and won $800.
Oh yeah, that was dinner. That was some good dinner.
No, the trip cost us $1,200, Peter. So
Oh, all right.
it wasn't even dinner. You know, it was,
Oh,
but it didn't
man.
matter. It didn't matter.
Mhm.
That's not why we went. That was nice. That was neat. But yeah, it was more so we could meet the other players, so that we could show people that 519 was you know going to be a force to be reckoned with. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, for the love of the game, pretty much. That's how esports
Yeah.
was back in the day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I know from there you played for a little bit and you eventually not transferred, but you transitioned into coaching.
I
So
did.
what happened there?
What happened was I got a job. So you know, back then I was going to school, and school gave me the flexibility to just kind of play as much Quake as I needed to and wanted to. But this was right around Y2K, and you know, that was, of course, everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, like the ball's gonna drop at midnight at the year 2000, and the computers are gonna, you know, they're gonna all explode." Well, that didn't happen. Obviously, we're all still here. Everything's fine. But
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
be shocked at how many companies were hiring because there were like mass conversions happening from like old networks to new types of networks, so that they were Y2K safe. And I was working at a computer store at the time, and this company, First Commerce Technology, they're like, "Hey, we're looking for individuals. We're salaried positions. We pay for your training." And I was like, "Man, this is great. Like, I love school. It's awesome, but I want the hands-on experience, and there probably won't be another Y2K ever again." So I took that opportunity. Definitely one of the very first of many risks that I would end up taking in my life, and it ended up paying off huge. However, the sacrifice, Peter, was that I didn't have a chance to play as much as I wanted to. And as we were scrimming and as I was playing more, I kind of came to that realization that, look, man, I can't keep up with everyone, right? I'm being average, and I need to be great to play with the team. So we had so many great players, and I decided I'm gonna pull back, but I don't feel comfortable just pulling back and then not contributing. So that's when I started coaching, and coaching kind of was the way that I tripped into shoutcasting. I think you know the story, but the real quick version is that the way that I would coach is not only would I be there for scrims, but I would record watching the games that were played and watching the scrims. And so I would record over them. And mostly it was me just berating the team. Like, "You all are idiots. Like, I cannot Gator. You were supposed to be at the quad damage 7 seconds ago. And here comes Swoop, and he comes in and he steals it. And then he gets 9 kills. What the hell?" And it was a lot of that, but I kept doing and would throw in my own like passion, excitement, like, "Oh my God, that was the most amazing shot. Like, every shot you should take should be like that." And eventually one of my teammates came to me and said, "Hey, you should do this like live and not have it be a recording that we listen to." And so at first I was like, "That's a dumb idea." I don't, partially because I didn't have the confidence in myself. I was just kind of like, it didn't click quite yet. But they were persistent, and I was like, all right, I think that sounds good. And that is kind of how I fell into shoutcasting, is that I did it live, and I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. People were talking. People were also enjoying this Quake game. Like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that was pretty much it. That was in 1999.
1999. All right. Before we get into like the heart, right, the details of your casting career, I just kind of want to talk about that because you said you wanted to do it live. What the heck did live look like in 1999?
Yeah, that's a great question. So live was exactly what people are watching right now. So, however, there was nothing to watch. So they were just hearing words, and they were following along in IRC, which would be similar to the chat. So to me, I feel like I've been using a version of Twitch for a very long time, because esports has always been built on this idea of, here is the way to listen to the action of the game, and here is a way to interact with the people who are watching and or listening the game. Now, we were fortunate enough that we had amazing spectator tools back in 1999, Peter. Not like now where all the shit. Okay, I'll refrain from.
Yeah, we had LAN. We had LAN features.
We had LAN features. We had amazing spectator tools. So there was actually a program called QTV. And GTV. And GTV, everyone would connect to it, and basically it was like an in-client video stream. So people would connect to it. However, because of the sync, I would have to actually say, okay, the game is about to start, and when you hear me say fight, you pause your Winamp. And then I'd say 3, 2, 1, fight, and I would resume the game. But they would wait for their GTV to catch up to fight, and then they would unpause, and they would be perfectly synced. Like it was kind of amazing. Like what people used to go through to watch esports coverage. The same thing would happen with HLTV and Counter-Strike 1.6. Warcraft 3 had WOG TV. So there was kind of a video version, but most people consumed esports from about 1999 until about 2005. Via audio, and not necessarily, or via an in-game client.
Yeah. And actually talking about that, so you did a lot of shoutcasting after you were encouraged to do it. I think a lot of people ended up really liking it, obviously. That's why you continue doing it. And then you got picked up for your first international gig at WCG Korea 2002, I believe.
I did. So I actually, about 2 months before, I did my first LAN event, which was QuakeCon 2002. And I broadcasted RTCW and Quake 3. And I got a cold call random email from someone at WCG who said, hey, our grand finals is going to be coming up here in October or November, and we would love to have you come out and shoutcast Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament. And I was like, yes, 100%. I want to go to Korea. At this point, right, I'd watched StarCraft VODs. He'd heard the stories about pro gaming in Korea, and this was an opportunity that I wasn't going to miss.
Dang. And there, obviously at that time, there were a lot of challenges with casting, and one of them I kind of want to speak to you about was the conflict of interest between you and organizations. Can you speak about how you navigated that situation and what you learned at the end of it?
Yeah, so the really quick context is that back in the early days, right, I call it the first era of esports. This would be like 1999 to 2004. Instead of individual talent being like their own channel or their own network, because esports was as small as it was, oftentimes you had organizations that would get together and they would have the infrastructure to broadcast, and there'd be one channel that like 20 or 30 commentators would use and schedule, etc. So this was kind of my first really interesting challenge when it came to esports, because I had been working my ass off as a commentator. I felt like an invite to Korea was a really validating thing for me, not only as like, oh, wow, maybe I am actually good enough that I could try to make a career out of this. And additionally, it was a light at the end of the tunnel for all the people that were like, this esports thing that you're doing is stupid. And it's like, no, I don't think it is. It was like my first really big opportunity. So this challenge came because the group that I was working with, TSN, Team Sportscast Network at the time, was like, whoa, Wheat, that's not how we do this. Like if an organization or a tournament wants you, they need to bring our whole coverage team out there. And I was like, well, dude, that makes no sense, right? Like they obviously they didn't have the massively huge budgets, or if they did, they were being used on GameNet or GOM TV or whatever. And so I said, you would rather lose this opportunity for everyone rather than give it to me individually, even though I would still go to Korea and represent TSN and broadcast to TSN. And they eventually were like, well, we're going to have a talk about it. And while they were having a talk about it, I essentially went back to them and said, you know what? There's no need to have a talk with it. I'm going to go. If you would like me to do coverage for TSN as djWHEAT, then I will do that. If I need to leave TSN so that I can go to WCG to cover it, I will find out a way to do that. And eventually they said, no, we don't want, we'd rather you go as TSN. But it was certainly a challenge, and I was worried, and it was another risk to say that, but it was an opportunity that I refused to let go of.
Yeah. What was it like, that conversation? Or I know you speak a lot about being diplomatic, right? And making sure that both parties are okay and taken care of. And obviously, for the love of competitive gaming and for the sake of your career, you were going to go there no matter what. How did you handle that conversation? Because it must have been kind of uncomfortable.
I mean, it is uncomfortable. And I mean, Peter, I'm 43 years old today, and I still feel like conflict resolution is something that I try to develop personally all the time. Like, it is one of the most difficult things to do, whether you are a manager, you're working in the industry, whatever that might be. It's tough. And sometimes by not facing conflict, it can just make more work for you or make things more difficult. And so, I knew that it was, I feel like for anything to grow, sometimes you've got to take risks. And to me, it was a risk. And it was me risking my relationship with TSN, but doing so with the confidence that even if I wasn't, I didn't stay with TSN, I would still be able to do something on my own. So it was a hard conversation, but it was just one of those ones where it's like, I knew I had to have it. So it was a pick up the phone, Juno, here's how it's going to be. This is how it needs to be. I'm loyal to you guys. I understand your position, but it doesn't make any sense for me to give up this opportunity just so, right, we try to get the whole network out here, right? Because flying 20 people from the United States to Korea doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, not at all.
So I was all about building that relationship, right? And that's where I probably was diplomatic about it, Peter. I was like, Juno, there's an opportunity for me to go here to represent TSN and to continue to build this relationship. So maybe it's not happening this year, but when WCG USA happens next year, we can jump on top of that. When the grand finals happens again, then we can start talking about that. But we've got to build that relationship.
Yeah. And going out to your first international event, but I guess not even, even going to QuakeCon, right? Casting at a different venue is so different than casting from your bedroom. What were some of the ways that you prepared to get yourself prepared for that type of event?
Dude, I don't know that it really I prepared all that much back then. I mean, I was preparing just because I was watching games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, so I knew who was who. I knew where they were from. I knew how they played. For me, that's all I needed, because it was just an opportunity to watch them all play on LAN for like the first time, right? Outside of some of the other tournaments that have happened. So admittedly, it took me a few years before I started. It was probably when I started getting into other games that I really started learning how to prepare better, right? Coming with notebooks and writing things down and studying what I was going to do ahead of time. But those first few events, Peter, man, I was in Quake so much that it was just my brain was a Quake computer. So I didn't necessarily feel like I had to. It was practice. It was just shoutcast every day, 3 hours every day. Every day, here's some games, here's some pickup scrims, shoutcast, all day, every day. That to me was the best way that I could improve at that time.
Yeah, and I think that actually, like, while at first it may not seem like you prepared at all, but it speaks a lot to who you are and your work ethic and the passion that you had for esports and the game that you were playing. You lived and breathed that, and in turn, that was basically your preparation. You didn't need to, because you were in it all the time.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah. And what about finding gigs? How did that work out? And and how is it like different than today?
Oh gosh, it's a lot different today, because finding gigs was partially chasing and then partially just discovery. Like you'd go to QuakeCon and you'd meet someone at Intel, and then Intel would be like, maybe you could do your shoutcasting from our booth. And then, that's kind of how then we started doing some of our events, and then we found out that there was a sponsor that started wanting to go to these events. So we started working with them, right? It was way different back then, because it was a lot about that early networking, versus now there's a lot of organization. There's a lot of things going on. There's agencies that are helping talent find these jobs and these positions. It's a lot more normal to like cold email a tournament or a TO and say, here's my reel. I would love to be involved with your league. So, more than anything, I would say the opportunities were obviously much less, but a lot of the opportunities just fell out of the sky. Right, a new tournament would start. They'd hear, oh yeah, there's these individuals over here. Radio ITG. They do shoutcasting. Like you should contact them. And then suddenly we'd be on a phone call, and then we'd be doing coverage. So it was a lot different. I wouldn't say I would say now there's more opportunities. I don't think they're both hard. Both have challenges. But now, I would say there's just more opportunities out there.
Mm-hmm. And how would you go about taking advantage of the fact that there's more opportunities? What are like some of the best practices that you've seen in this industry to kind of help you get noticed and land more gigs, build that relationship?
Obviously it goes back to what I said, is that, I've talked to a lot of individuals. They're like, I want to be a shoutcaster. I'm like, awesome. What game do you want to shout? I want to shoutcast Rocket League. So awesome. What have you done? I need something, before no, that's the wrong answer. Wrong answer, or the right answer is like, well, I have my buddies get in, and every night for an hour, I broadcast their games, or, after the last RLCS happened, I went back and I like covered it on my channel after the fact, or, I put together this reel. You're only going to be able to get noticed if you are shoutcasting, if you are creating content, right now, Twitch and other streaming platforms give you the ability to spin up a tournament and kind of showcase your skills or practice in that regard. Back then it was all audio based, and now you can do, so many more cool things, and you've obviously got a video component for it. So, I mean, first and foremost, like that's where you've got to start. I can't even begin to tell individuals how many hours of shoutcasting that, nowadays would be like yelling into my closet to no one, right? Thousands of hours of, oh my God, it's an hour before this game gets started. So I'm sitting there and talking to people, and we're, talking about the tournament and different teams and players, and then the game starts, and you've just got to do it. You've got to take that first step. And that first step oftentimes is yell into a live stream, even if it has 1 or 2 or 5 people in it. That's the first step that you've got to take before you're going to get started, before you're going to be able to send a reel in, before you're going to be able to contact someone, or before someone's going to contact you.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agreed. And audience, hold that thought right there. Everything that he just said, hold on to that, because we'll definitely be retouching upon that in a little bit when we talk about content creation. But now I want to jump a little bit to 2005, right? When you moved to LA, you started working for GGL, and this was the time that you said you were casting a lot of different games. Mm-hmm. And so while I do have some prepared scenarios, what were kind of some of your biggest hurdles that you overcame when casting for GGL?
Well, there was obviously, we were transitioning to video, so that was just a interesting scenario, because a lot of times I would be the producer, I would be a technical director, and I would try to be shoutcasting at the same time. Casting a wide variety of games is definitely one of those. During the WCG era especially, you could go to a grand finals and they would say like, all right, we need a shoutcaster for Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And we're like, hey team, has anyone ever shoutcasted Tony Hawk before? No. Does anyone feel comfortable? It's like, well, I used to skateboard a little bit and I played a shitload of Tony Hawk. All right, Marcus, I'm going to go up, and someone else is going to go up. And you do it, right? And you would hopefully take everything that you had learned from other games and just applied it to a new game. And I do believe that when you've casted enough games, you start to esports games become like the Matrix, and before you really understand, they're just a bunch of green code, it's floating down the screen, but eventually you just kind of learn to tell the story that exists in every single esports game, right? To me, that's what shoutcasting is. It is being a live storyteller and understanding how you pull that story out. Is it by the number of rounds they're playing? Is it is it how much time that is left? Is it the amount of space between the scores? Is it the map that was just chosen because this team isn't very good on that map, right? You just had to be able to understand where you could pull those threads and then put it together to tell an entertaining story. And then the other part of it is to convey excitement. I always felt like the best broadcasts I ever did, those are the ones that people would say, oh my God, like you made me so excited during that match. Boom. That's what every caster wants to do, is to take those amazing plays and to amp them up and hype them up and make them, even more exciting than they already are. So I do think that there is a lot of benefit if you are ever going to be a shoutcaster in shoutcasting other games. Yeah. I could actually spend an entire hour on my philosophy behind being a single game shoutcaster versus shoutcasting a single game. And a lot of stuff has changed, but I really do believe that it's, learning to shoutcast other games can be the best way to improve as a shoutcaster.
Yeah. It's kind of like playing different video games and having those skill sets kind of transfer over, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. Oh man, all right. Let's see. You covered a lot. I had some notes, and you covered a lot, so I don't need to go over that. But before we move on to the era of content creation, I would love to bring up a story that really, really resonated with me, and I'm super sure it'll resonate with students and recent graduates, and maybe even people starting to get their careers going. Can you please tell us the story of how you ended up working at MLG Dallas during the early days of StarCraft 2?
Yeah. So obviously, like many, was very excited for StarCraft 2 to come out. I was an observer during Brood War, right? I played some games. We would land it every once in a while, but not nearly as serious of a player as many others. But that didn't mean I wasn't super excited. So, played a lot in the beta and was a part of Day 9's launch party. And it was something that I really, really loved to do. At that point, I had been starting up some shows that were StarCraft 2 focused. And I think prior to that MLG event, there was one other MLG event. And I remember watching it from home. And I remember being like, wow, I really want to, I really think that I could go and bring some entertainment and some experience, and I'm pretty confident and comfortable shoutcasting StarCraft 2. And so I emailed Ben and Sundance, and I said, hey, listen, guys, I really, really would love to join you guys and be on your coverage team, and I'd love to shoutcast, and I'll tell you what, like, if you would fly me out there, I don't want a dime. I just want to come and work for you guys over the weekend to show you how serious I am about wanting to cover StarCraft 2 with you. And that's all it took. I went there. I prepared. I was like, I will cast anything, everything, 15 hours a day. You just point and tell me, and I will go. And I feel like I did a really great job that weekend, enough that they said, hey, we'd love for you to officially join our coverage team. They started paying me. Eventually, they let me open up their entire MLG event as a host. So, that to me was another one of those big risks, right? Like, yeah. I mean, I felt like it was a very low impact risk. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Sundance says, you know what, we've decided you suck and we don't want you to join. There was, I guess, the risk of rejection, but I was like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to take everything that I've learned over the last 10 years of shoutcasting, and I'm going to bring it because I think I know what MLG wants. And, that I really feel like that sort of, cemented my ability to get work in StarCraft 2, thanks to, just one weekend of working, for free. And I worked at Twitch at the time. So I just said, hey, I'm going to take the weekend off and go to Dallas. And, that was that. Nice.
Yeah, the reason why it resonates so much with me is because I know recently there's been a lot of discussion about not working for free and how that's super bad. But I think it's like there's everything in context. A lot of how I got my start was also working for free too. And and I feel, this is me, as long as you understand your value and how to not get taken advantage of, then I think it's a really good chance. It's a risk, like you said, to take the risk and kind of like bootstrap your career.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, I always have trouble with this one because, I want people to get paid, right? Like, when I was able to pay people for the first time in esports, that felt amazing too. What I do want to say is that there are definitely scenarios where an opportunity might present itself, and you should always evaluate those opportunities. And I think that, that was 2 days. 3 days, right? An event weekend. Mm-hmm. If someone comes to me and said, hey, Wheat, should I like work for free for 6 months for the city? Oh, no. Like, don't do that. Right. But there might be opportunities, right? A lot of people find opportunities even in the streaming space. They will join with a mod team. They will help produce a show. They will, help a broadcaster, or help a tournament organizer, or run a tournament, or wrangle players, right? There's a lot of really interesting ways that you can get in. You can meet new people. And that might not necessarily pay you. But again, you've got to evaluate each and every one of those one of those situations. You also just got to know, right, what your worth is, and understand that, right? Like everyone should be able to get paid for the work that they do in esports. But there's other opportunities maybe as you're building up to that you will explore and find. And in a lot of cases, I dare say something like get paid in experience, but that's what I felt like when I was kind of growing up in the esports world, like how I looked at it, right? It's like if we could get flights and hotel, we're building our resume. We are legitimizing esports as the best that we can. Now people don't have to worry about legitimizing esports. Like there's money in esports. So find those jobs, but just know, like, if you evaluate, you could find opportunities where you could maybe contribute a little bit of your time and you can gain so much from it.
Gotcha. Now, let's fast forward even more to when you moved back to Nebraska and you became a content creator. You were pretty much a content creator, even though you were working for Twitch at this time. And while we were preparing for this, you taught me that content creation is one of the best tools for being a caster, for honing your skills, not only in casting, but hosting and producing. Can you expand on this concept?
Yeah,
sorry, that was a little. That was rough.
No. It's, again, this is like one of those things where I feel like I could talk for 5 hours on. So I was very fortunate that when esports started, it was less about the content, the streaming of it, and more just esports. So it was like esports all the time. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, man, I really need to do something not esports. And so in 2002, I created what would be a live podcast, a video game show called Epileptic Gaming. And it was just basically me and a bunch of friends just sitting around and shooting the shit about video games. And, I was the host, the producer, the individual who ran the show. I was the one who published it. Like I put every single hat on that I possibly could. But that meant that I was like, oh my gosh, producing a show is hard. I need to figure out how to make it easier, or I need to learn more about how to produce content, or what are some of the strategies and philosophies that go in behind it. So that's how I started like reading more about it and getting a lot of experience just making my own content. And 28 people tuned into the first episode of Epileptic Gaming, and then about 7 years later, when it was a daily video game show, we had 4,000 people tuning in every day. And this was in 2007, during a time when like that would be like 50,000 people today in sort of the live streaming world.
And this was before Twitch. This was Stickcam.
Oh,
right?
this is way before Twitch. Oh yeah. This was I was on a site called Stick'em. What I learned from it is I could just take about any topic. I could take something like esports. I could take something and I could turn it into content that could supplement everything else I'm doing. But just like you said, you've got to host a show. You've got to do intros. You've got to do outros. You've got to take breaks. And that all was just kind of preparing me for eventually in 2009, 10, 11, stepping on that stage at MLG and doing, that work there. So there's so much to gain, and it is hard work. Like making weekly shows is real tough work. In fact, I've burned out more on that than I have on esports casting, just because it can be a lot of work, but it is so beneficial. I mean, eventually, Epileptic Gaming created Inside the Game, Kings of 10, probably one of the shows I'm most known for, Live on 3. All of these shows kind of like leveled one and another up. And I would say that, Live on 3 at that time was kind of the pinnacle of what I felt like you could do with esports and talk show content creation. And by that time, I really felt like I was as much a producer as I was a host or a shoutcaster.
Yeah. And where would people go learn about production? Because I know we could spend hours talking about the details of being a producer, like run of the show, making sure all the tech stuff is good. Like, where would people just go to get started?
Well, so it's a great question. You know, in the world of the internet, there are a billion books. There are a ton of videos that you can sort of, you know, learn and read about producing. But I'm one of those individuals that feels like the best experience is just throwing yourself at it and then supplementing what you are missing, right? So, you know, like think about before you do a show, you go live with it, you want to come up with a treatment. It's like, what is the show and what do I hope to accomplish with this show and what will I do in this show? And what are my first 10 episodes going to be? Because the hardest thing about starting a new show is like those first 6 episodes as you are finding your rhythm, your groove to get into it. But then I would realize like, oh, I don't know how to run a show, or I don't know how to organize my show properly. So I'm going to look that up. I'm going to read about how television does it, about how they do it in movies. And I was like, okay, movies is too much. I don't need that. I need television. And so I went back to television and I read a book and I talked to people who were involved in making television. And that's how I would kind of pick it up and adapt. And I would say, well, that's not exactly what I'm going to do, but learning these things, I'm going to take these 3, which is, you know, I'm going to put together sort of a time rundown of everything. This is how I'm going to organize the information that's in there. And also I'm going to distribute it to everyone a day before the show so they know what we're talking about, right? Very, very basic things. But then as you produce this content, as you continue to work towards it, you find, oh, I don't know how to do that. Or I bet you there is a better way to do this. Or this part is really hard. Someone has figured out how to do this. Like, I am not the first individual to run into this problem. So that's where I would then, you know, make an effort to expand my own knowledge, whether that be reading a book or reaching out and talking to someone. And, you know, obviously everyone learns a little bit differently. This is what has worked really well for me. I'm very hands-on. I love to just tackle it, hit my head up against the wall and go like, okay, these 3 things suck. Like, let's fix them. And then educating myself to figure out how we would fix it or attack those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Dang. Yeah. That's all really good information. I mean, I learned a lot just by watching other people, by seeing how you did things and trying to emulate it, you know, try to like reverse engineer how you were producing your shows. So it's good.
Awesome.
It's good.
Did it help?
Oh yeah, it did. Especially when I went to visit you at Twitch. When I went to visit you at Twitch, and I was like, "Oh, that's what that was." Like, I didn't know what a run a show was. I didn't know that there was a script you wrote every single week and double checked it with everybody and collecting the clips that you needed. Like, there's a lot of work that's put into the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Last show we're going to talk about is Live on 3. This was probably one of the most influential esports shows that ran for so many years. It was arguably a little bit controversial at times too, but I think that's what made it so great. And so what was your experience like producing a show like this? And I wanted to talk more about the challenges of talking about sensitive issues, not burning bridges, or being a diplomat again, and calling out people and doing right by the community while, you know, like, you got to tiptoe. So there's a lot to go there, and you could go ahead.
Yeah. So Live on 3, you know, really started from the passion of 3 individuals who just loved esports, myself, Slasher Scoots, and you know, wanted a platform to talk about it. And, you know, to be honest, when we started Live on 3, man, we had to really dig deep for stuff to talk about. It wasn't like there's this tournament and this tournament and this is happening and this is happening. So the first year and a half, you know, we were like, oh, we don't have anything to talk about. Okay, well, WCG Ultimate Gamer is on USA. So every week that a guest gets eliminated, let's like interview the guest, and we'll be the official podcast to interview them. And that's how I, you know, met In Control, and that's where I, you know, had kind of met and run into Seltzer, and I already knew a lot of people from esports that were a part of that show. So we just kind of started from there, but then what ended up happening is Live on 3 started growing up with the esports industry that was, that was blooming out of 2009. All of a sudden, we've got Street Fighter 4 and League of Legends is hitting and StarCraft 2. And oh my gosh, like the fighting game is seen and the fighting game community is getting involved. And like we know some people, we should try to get involved there. And so it really sort of allowed Live on 3 to say, hey, cool, all this stuff's happening in esports. So first and foremost, we're here to tell you that every single esport out there is so important, right? Like you can hate Halo and you can love League of Legends, but you got to respect that the Halo players are just as freaking amazing as everyone else. And so that's how we approached the show, right? We would just one week have a League of Legends player on it, and the next week there'd be a Counter-Strike player, and the next week we'd have a caster on. And we really tried to cover as much esports as we could. But you mentioned some of the sensitive issues, and like it was tough because I was also a shoutcaster in the industry, and I wanted to keep working as a shoutcaster in the industry. However, I also wanted to be an individual that would speak up and educate about the things that were happening in esports. And I think probably one of the most famous Live on 3 conflict moments was when we went hard on MLG about their gold pass, and then like getting rid of their gold pass, and then like not having a plan for it, and it going to the silver pass, and then that not working over the weekend. And like Sundance, who by the way was so amazing that he came on our show and let us basically rip into him on behalf of the community. But also you still had to be diplomatic about it, right? There is a right way to go about giving criticism and giving feedback, and there is a really bad way of doing it. And I think Live on 3 really let me examine each and every situation. And I'll be honest with you, Peter, sometimes I couldn't say anything, right? And that's probably one of the reasons why Live on 3 ended, because my involvement and role within Twitch made it much more difficult to be as critical as I wanted to be on some of the things that were happening in esports. And that wasn't fair to me or the show or Scoots or Slasher. But during that time, it was a very interesting balance. And yet what I would ask people to take away from there is hey, it's okay to be critical. It's okay to speak your mind. It's okay to explain to the audience the behind the scenes of esports so they understand why it might have taken 15 minutes for that game to start and why, the casters were yapping away or whatever. But I just, I don't know. I really think that you can be critical, but you can still be someone who can get opportunities, jobs, etc., and not just be like a yes person, if that makes sense.
100%. That makes complete sense. Thank you for speaking on that. I think that's what a lot of people needed to hear, honestly. All right. Now, we are getting close to the end. We got the warning, so it looks like we might have to do a little bit of a speed round and then get to some Q&A. But we're going to fast forward again, 2014 to the present time. You are now, this time you're in San Francisco, working at Twitch. You're in the studio, and you are now the director of Twitch Studios. What were some of the challenges of creating content for a company versus creating content for yourself?
It's great, and it's also not great. It's great because making content for a company usually means that you have access to an enormous amount of resources. You have people who are there to help you out. Maybe you have a budget to play with. But it's not great because you're not necessarily making the content that you want to make. So it's a sacrifice, right? I loved all the content that I got a chance to make as the director of Twitch Studios, everything from Twitch Weekly to creating, being a big one of the core 4 individuals to put together TwitchCon, to things like Stream On, to, letting the producers do things like indie shows and, Amin put together Fresh Stock. And it let us just really kind of experiment and try new things to help kind of development of our creators through content. But, you know, there comes a point where, you know, you're still making content for, right, the company. Again, great, but you know, after a while, I got burnt out, Peter. Like, I don't know what else to say, right? Like, I felt like I wanted to make content for myself again. And thankfully, that allowed me to like transition into a wonderful new job at Twitch. I do not regret that at all. I really love the opportunity that I was given for the director of Twitch Studios, and it is, you know, still around today, and still doing some really neat stuff in the space. But it's a lot different, and you have to remember that moment that you do get hired to make content for a company. Don't let me get you wrong. It's incredible to get paid to do things like that. But after 5 years for me, I realized that I didn't want to make it that my focus anymore. That I was still having fun doing it, but I just felt like I was getting to that burnout stage again.
Yeah. Also, shout out to the show Fanboys. That was one of my favorite shows that you hosted, you know, with In Control and a bunch of other guests talking about music. I mean, no, not music. TV shows, movies, and comic books, and it was so much fun.
Thank you. I love that show too.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with that.
Being in a leadership position this time, because being the director of Twitch Studios, and then I realized that you weren't only home by yourself working on content, but this time you had a team. You had a lot of people. You know, one of the people I met that was super good at what he did was Sully, and just a bunch of other people in control room, right? Like, what did you manage to, like, what is it like working with a team like that?
It's incredible, especially when your team has good chemistry and synergizes well. I mean, Twitch Studio had some amazing individuals. Adam Contini, who was a longtime MLG director, ran our video production department. He had Dan Mihorik, Amin, Sully. And then we had a producer core, which was run by Anna. And, you know, we had Britt and Mary and Josh. And of course, Mary and Josh ended up kind of starting a cat team, which was kind of an offshoot of studios in terms of helping individuals getting set up and streaming on Twitch. And we had great support as well from you know, Nadja and James. And I mean, it's just, there's nothing better than working for a team, Peter. And look, everyone's a little bit different. I have found out in my as I get older and older, and as I look back and I reflect, that, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, Marcus, you've been at Twitch for a long time, you've done all this esports stuff, like, why don't you like go start your own thing and go do whatever? And that's not very appealing to me. What is appealing is finding a group or a team of people who are passionate about the exact same things and doing amazing stuff with them, whether it is my idea or someone else's idea. That's where I'm at. And I feel like that's where I've been kind of my whole life. And in the world of streaming and live streaming and esports and content creation, boy, has that been fruitful for me. And so I feel like if there's any advice I can give, it is, you know, surround yourself with the people that want to work, that want to put their hearts, their souls, their passions into it. That will be inspiring to you. It is motivating to you. And, you know, furthermore, can I just say that I've also had the ability to work with some amazing, incredible women along the way, all the way back to like Trillian and DA in the shoutcasting days, to, you know, Britt, Seltzer, Anna, Mary, Kelly, you know, in sort of the latter half of esports. Frankie was someone who was also on Twitch Studios. And, you know, I look back on any team that I've ever worked on, and I feel like those are some of my fondest memories. And you get to share your successes, and you get to comfort one another over your defeats, and you get to learn together. And yeah, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Doing, like, I can stream by myself, whatever.
Yeah.
Everything else I just want to do with people. And I have that famous I guess famous tweet, but everyone
It is a
always
famous tweet.
a lot of people always, I've had game developers say that they have quoted that tweet and like printed it out and put it up on their walls. But I still, stand by it. And it's all I want more than anything is to work with people who give a fuck, as much of a fuck as I do. And I feel like that is the secret to my success, is if you find those people that give as much of a fuck as you do, then you're gonna have success.
Yes, 100%. And that tweet has inspired me to work as hard as I have and try to find these people that I align with in order to get some amazing things done. I see a lot of parallels actually now that you were talking about this, between working with a team in production and just working with a team in competitive gaming. That's what you've always been doing. I just thought that was kind of like a really cool thing.
What, working as a team?
Yeah, just teamwork, right?
Yeah,
competitive gaming or production, you're always working with a team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's success. Yeah.
One more topic that I really want to touch upon, because I think this is really interesting. And what was it like working on the live stage shows? I know you guys worked a lot of things when PAX had a Twitch stage, for TwitchCon. E3 is kind of live stage, but still it's for a different thing. There's probably a lot of different parties involved. What was that process like, and what you learned from what were the biggest things you learned from doing that kind of work?
Organization, a lot of organization. Oh my gosh. Like what I want to say, Peter, is that we've talked about producing shows online. We talked about, if you want to be a caster, like, pick it up and just start shoutcasting. And I got the fortunate ability to basically be the one person on the team who was in charge of the content at the very first TwitchCon. There was 4 people on that team. It was Katney, and then Amber Dalton, and Amy Brady. So I was the one that was basically in charge of content. And let me just tell you that, you've got to make the content. You've got to figure out what's going to go up on stage. You've got to do that. But like, working in the behind the scenes on a convention, and what you need to do all this, and how you're going to run everything on stage, and how much time you need to get people in the theater and out of the theater. What I wanted to say is that what I learned the most is that, wow, thank God I did all of these other things leading up to this, because otherwise I would have bit off more than I could chew. Right. And so there were some really hard things during that whole planning period, that even 5 E3s before that and a bunch of PAXs helped me get ready for, but were still right on their own level of challenges. So what I really learned from those is that organization is the key to success with any level of production. That the more you think about it, and the more you put into the contingency plans and think about what could go wrong, and obviously you want to build it thinking everything's going to go right, but you have to know that you are ready if anything goes wrong. And the best productions are the ones that you're so prepared for that it didn't matter that you didn't have to use your plan B, C, D, E, or F, because plan A worked perfectly. But when you do, and something messes up, or that console stops working, you better be ready to go to plan D. And let me tell you, there's nothing more awkward than being up on the stage and not having your next plan. So, right, if there's anything to take away from that, it's that if you're thinking about production or casting, it's that you want to put some time and effort into thinking about what could go wrong, and what you would do in the situation, or what the team would do in the situation if something were to go wrong.
Awesome. And the very last question before we get into Q&A.
Sure.
Now we have come to present time. And you are now the head of creator development. This is you now. This is your position. This is your work, and you have so much passion for it. Every single time I hear you talk about this position, what impact do you wish to have with your work?
it's kind of amazing, Peter, because I'm getting that point in my life where I'm like, oh, wow, I am a lot older and wiser thanks to all the experience and things that I've gone through. But it's also amazing at what you discover about yourself from your past. And, my parents were both in behavioral education, and they were both coaches, and they were both mentors in their own way. And I think a lot of what they taught early on, whether it was with us or some of the kids that they worked with, was kind of to, how to improve themselves. And like, I learned a lot about coaching and mentorship. And I think throughout my entire career, whether that was working at TSN or then starting Radio ITG or going to work at GGL or then, getting into the live streaming business and then casting and then Twitch, is that along the way, surrounding myself by awesome individuals to be a part of a team has also allowed me to be a leader. And I think that I'm personally there's a lot of different types of leader. I am definitely like a coaching leader. I want to motivate you. I want to improve you. I want to figure out what makes you tick and how we can help you chase your dream. And so I think it really took me, I was probably 38, maybe 37 when I realized, like, holy shit. Yeah, I've been mentoring people kind of my whole life. I just didn't really think about it that way. I was just being a friend, being a business colleague, but the ways that I would do it, the practices, some of the things that I would do, the things that we would talk about are coaching and mentorship. So what I realized is, after 38 years is, wow, this is really my passion. I just happened to be in esports doing that at one point, or being at GGL and producing content at one point, or being at Twitch. So the role of head of creator development for me now is kind of like me coming full circle, right? Like I've been on the stage and I loved it and it was great and I've cast it. I'll probably still kind of do it here and there. But what I really wake up in the morning for is seeing other people, be successful in that area, right? Seeing the next new broadcaster, sitting down with someone and giving them some motivation, some insight, some thoughts into a way that they could improve. Like that to me is, that is one of the greatest feelings ever. And so it took me a long time to get to that point because admittedly, like, and I'm sure many people are like, I was driven by my dream, and I would never say that I pushed someone out of the way to do that. I mean, working as a team, you don't really do that, but it feels good to not feel like I have to have pressure on my back to do that anymore, right? Like I can sit back and say, I just want to help other people chase their dream, and if that means I take a little bit of pressure off of them, great, I can handle that. And that's what I really love.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for saying all of that. And that concludes your story so far, right? You got a lot you got a lot more to give.
No, I do.
I'm excited to see where your journey takes you. And so we're gonna go into Q&A. We got two questions. The first one is gonna be, what are some ways to help yourself mentally recover from an off night, from a poor performance?
Great question, because can tell you what not to do, and that is to stay awake for the entire night thinking about it. Because one of the most important things that I feel like I learned early on was that shoutcasting, especially in a live capacity, it's there, it happened, it's over, right? Like you can't go back and change your words. You can't go back and necessarily change what you said, right? Like maybe it's like, oh, I just totally like called this poorly, or I was looking at this player, I should have been looking at that player. The best thing you can do is to write down what you think made your performance poor, and then write down 3 ways that you are going to improve like your next, to make sure that thing doesn't happen, right? So I mentioned like, I was totally, I was in a Counter-Strike game and someone was coming from apartments, but I was like, I was thinking they were coming long. So I was observing the guy on long and then I missed it. It's like, cool. You think you had a poor performance because you weren't on top of the observing ball. Now I'm giving an example, like people have observers now, that's great. But I'd write down like 3 things, like pay better attention to the mini map. Like when there are 2 players left, be more attentive to switching back and forth in case any of them, right? And so writing down those 3 things just puts it into your head that you've got these 3 options if you run into that scenario again. I take a lot of, I personally do a lot of, right, like how I would think about improving myself as a broadcaster is thinking about what you didn't particularly like about it, writing down the 3 things that you feel like you would change about it. If you've got other broadcasting friends, talk to them about it. Like they're a great resource as well. You don't have to figure this all out on your own. But the other thing I would just say, to mentally recover is say, you're going to have another cast. It's going to be awesome. And no one is defined by a single moment of their casting career.
Great. And very last Q&A question. In your opinion, what is the most underrated game of all time?
That is a troll. I am not going to answer that question. I know who it is from. I am not going to answer that question.
All right. With that concludes pretty much everything. Marcus, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here with us, to tell your story, teach us everything that you've learned throughout your journey. Is there anything you would like to say or shout out before I do the closing?
Yeah, I would. And sorry, I was reading this last question that came in, and I know we don't have time, but if that individual wants to reach out to me on Twitter or Discord, I would be happy to answer that question. Okay. Yeah. DM Steven, you asked a really long question. My DMs are open. If you want to send that to me via Twitter, you can follow me at djWHEAT. I'd be happy to answer that for you this week. So, yeah, I would just want to say thank you to UConnect Esports. Thanks for letting me come on and chat with you, Peter, on the Collegiate Rising series. And I'm always super excited about individuals who are passionate about getting into esports. So, thank you for spending your day or last 3 days listening to some of the content. Thanks to everyone else who came and contributed. I think this type of education is really, really, really cool. And I'm almost jealous that individuals have access to this type of education instead of having to like fall on their face and get back up and figure out how to do it all over again on their own. They get a little push in the right direction. I do have a new podcast that I'm really proud of. It's, I would say, like the next evolution of some of the content that I'm personally making. It's called First Person Origins, and I've teamed up with one of the first-person shooter gamers and professionals of all time, Dennis Thresh Fong. And each week we sit down with a notable individual in the gaming industry, and we talk about their origin story and find out what makes them tick. And we hear cool stories about what their upbringing was like and how that affected getting into the industry and some of the jobs they did, et cetera. It's a lot of fun. You can find it on Spotify or any of your favorite podcast networks. It's also up in video form on YouTube as well. But I'd love for you to check it out. And just thanks to everyone who's ever, listened to a game, given me a chance, listened to me talk about esports. I really appreciate it. Your support has been instrumental in helping me build, some of the things that I've been able to build in esports. And I thank you, each and every one of you, for that. So, and thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely check out the podcast if you want to figure out where WSAD movement came from. I think that's a very interesting thing to learn. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the face of esports. I want to thank our friends at HyperX for sponsoring the competitive day of Collegiate Rising Day 3. They've been longtime supporters of the collegiate ecosystem, and we are proud to work with them, as well as being their exclusive platform for HyperX's collegiate event sponsorships. This concludes the debut of Collegiate Rising's Esports Summit, presented by UConnect and powered by Twitch Student. Thank you to our partner communities at Kbunbun, Intercollegiate Game Network, and BeachCon. our partners at Hitmarker, Juked, and our production partner, Space Productions, for putting on such a clean show. We want to give one last shout out to our speakers and moderators for taking time out of their day to talk and mentor the collegiate community, and to all of the staff at Uconnect Esports for making this possible. They put on a lot of passion and hard work into this. The Collegiate Rising Esports Summit series takes place live as part of the programming of every PAX, DreamHack, South by Southwest, and TwitchCon. So follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for news of our next digital and live summits. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope all of you guys have a great rest of the night. See you later.
Burning down the walls, we let the monsters in, and now we're running down the halls. No, we can't let them